Leadership in the Future is our last presentation. Our presenter, Edie Weiner, is the president of a leading futurist consulting firm, Weiner, Edrich, and Brown. She's acknowledged as one of the most influential practitioners of social, technological, political, and economic intelligence gathering and forecasting. Please join me in offering a warm welcome to Edie Weiner.
Thanks, Rick. It's easier. It's shorter. So it's late. You've heard a whole lot of things going on today. And so I just want to have a little fun with you first. And God's really ticked off. Calls his favorite priest, his favorite minister, his favorite imam, and his favorite rabbi. And he says, I've had it with all of you. Very shortly, it's going to rain. It's going to rain for 2 weeks. I'm getting rid of you all. Don't want any more. Just go and tell your people. Take care of it. So the imam goes and calls all his people together. And he says, really awful news. Very shortly, it's going to rain for 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, it's going to rain for 40 days. 40 days, 40 nights. And get rid of all your possessions. Everything you own, get rid of it. Go back to the first day of paradise. Go back to simplicity. And maybe God will accept you in heaven. And the minister calls all his people together. And he says, bad news. In 2 weeks, it's going to rain for 40 days and 40 nights. Get all your people together and tell them to do good deeds, as many good deeds as they can in the next 2 weeks, and maybe God will take them into heaven. And the priest calls all of his people together, and he says, really bad news, in 2 weeks it's going to rain for 40 days and 40 nights. Pray. Pray as hard as you can. Pray for the next 2 weeks, and maybe God will take you into heaven. Rabbi calls all his people together, and he says, all right, listen up. We got 2 weeks to figure out how to live underwater. So there are leaders and there are leaders. And as we look out at the landscape of leaders, we know that there's no absolute formula. But when I had to do my first talk on leadership, it was about 25 years ago. And at that time, there were several thousand books being published every single year on leadership. Several thousand. That year, I think, there was about 2,100 books being published on leadership. So I figured, okay, this is an easy talk to do. You just stand on a stage and you do cliches, because everybody has thoughts on leadership, and it's easy to just talk about it. But then I ripped into myself and I said, I've never been on a stage telling people everything they know, and I'm not going to do it again. So I wrote 2 names on a piece of paper, Mother Teresa and Adolf Hitler. And I said, I can't give a talk on leadership until I understand what these 2 people have in common. And I worked at that, and I could only find 3 things that they had in common, although somebody corrected me a few years later and said there was a 4th, and that was a mustache. But the 3 things that I was able to find that they did have in common, the first was a vision and an absolute passion for that vision. The second was the ability to articulate in words and or deeds that vision to the extent that disinterested people would follow them. You're not a leader because you're a CEO. People follow you because if they don't, they're going to get fired. All you are as a CEO is an executive, a manager. And the same thing is true for a lot of people in the C-suites. They're not leaders unless disinterested people are so invested in their vision that they are willing to follow them. And those disinterested people could be inside or outside the organization, potential employees who want to work for that person, who want to come to that company because of that vision. It could be stakeholder groups, lobby groups, other groups who believe in that. And the third thing that they have in common is total lack of embarrassment in the articulation of that vision. Because the minute you think you're going to get thrown out of your country club, the minute you think that your family or your coworkers are going to think you're crazy, the minute you believe that people will ostracize you or make fun of you for that position and that vision, it is sensed, and you lose your leadership. We have the ability to sense when somebody is truly, truly invested in their vision, or whether they're just talking it, and they're really scared when push comes to shove to make it happen. I don't care if we are talking thousands of years ago, and I don't care if we're talking hundreds of years from now. I do believe that those are the three essences, the core of all leaders. And everything else that we have looked at for all of these years back, and all the books that are still being written, and all the talks that are still being given, are grounded in what we might call values-based leadership, not leadership. Because leadership, as I've just said, is really clean, really simple. Values-based leadership gets us into some murky territory. Because values-based leadership says not only does somebody have all three of these things, but they also have some values or beliefs that coincide with what you may want to see in a leader.